Welcome again to a new episode of the Abactra podcast. Today we have with us Levente László, who is a PhD candidate for the University of Eötvös in Budapest. He has a PhD, is working on a PhD exactly on transmission of astrological texts, of which we'll talk about in a moment. He is also someone who has been studied for a long time the transmission of Greek, Arabic, and Latin texts, astrological texts. Throughout the age, he has several articles in the verge of being published. I'll put a link to that in the description of the podcast. So, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's always glad to speak with a colleague, PhD candidate.
Yes.
So, László, welcome. So, let us know a little bit about your research and your area of research.
All right. Well, actually, my area of research is text and texts, astrological text and textual transmission. Especially nowadays, I deal with Greek texts mostly, and I try to do some research in authorship questions. So whether a certain text was really written by the historical figure. This text is attributed to, which is sometimes a very delicate question, and also the transmission of ideas, how different concepts, tools, techniques were transmitted from one author to the other one, or between cultures or within cultures. So this is my main field of interest.
Yes, yeah, it's quite an interesting one, and one we are delightful to speak about, because the Astro Project is again the idea is to study exactly the transmission, the techniques, and how techniques are put into practice. And this kind of research is quite precious to feed that kind of research, since sometimes we don't have access to the languages and exactly the establishment of the line of transmission, and to understand when a given idea, concept, or technique comes into being. Does it come from an earlier root? Does it not? And how does that work? I think it's extremely valuable for the future of research in the history of astrology. So you are addressing, I know that you've been working in several texts and in translation of several texts. We can speak about that in a while. What exactly are you focused on your current PhD work?
Well, actually, the title of the thesis I'm working on is the astrological inceptions of the Emperor Zeno's anonymous astrologer, which is a really complicated title. So actually, there are some extant inception cases. So these are actual case examples, which were cast by a 5th century astrologer, and David Pingree wrote a paper in the 70s and published some of these inceptions, and he just discovered that in most of the cases there is a sort of a political issue in the center. And he had the idea that these inceptions, these cases, should be attributed to the court astrologer, or possibly a court astrologer of the Emperor Zeno, who it was like between 470 something and 490 something. Yes, so these were the 2 decades when he was active, and. This is really complicated because these are not just isolated case examples found in different manuscripts. We can count up 10, so we can collect 10 case inceptions, partly extant in Greek and partly in Arabic. So sometimes there are 2 versions, but sometimes we only have one version of them. And and there are some other cases which are not political, but the methods used in these cases, the tools, the astronomical calculations, and the presentation of the data suggest that they were cast by the same astrologer. And there is another thing that this astrologer apparently didn't only deal with the inceptions, but also with the nativities. And one of the nativities that can be attributed to him is found embedded in a compendium that is attributed by scholars to Rhetorius of Egypt. And I wanted to clarify the authorship questions, like when was this compendium originally written? How the case example that can be attributed to a court astrologer of the emperor could be embedded or inserted into this compendium, or was it actually inserted later, or was it a part of this compendium originally? And some related questions were in my main focus that I have discovered, and I did some research on, and hopefully I can present this in an organized form, in a better organized form in my thesis. But it is really complicated because there are many texts, very difficultly interrelated, and so it is really complex.
That's very interesting, because Elena and I have been studying practices mainly, and that's the same thing you're doing. You're just picking up in case examples and seeing exactly what they're doing. And I think much of the understanding of techniques and practices comes exactly from practical examples. I think, although I know this is not absolutely true, but I think there's sometimes focus on the text itself, the theoretical text, which is, of course, quite an important topic because you have the lineage of teaching. But then I think example horoscopes and sometimes a little paper with an horoscope with some calculations on the side are sometimes absolutely valuable for us to understand exactly what kind of terms, dignities, techniques or approaches that they're having on this and on that period or that kind of context. Have you found this easy to ascertain? So I'm not familiar with these case studies. Is it easy to understand exactly what kind of lineage and techniques he's doing, or not really? Because I know sometimes it's not clear. They don't have enough information.
Well, I guess that there is always a sort of a gap between theory and actual practice. If unfortunately we have very few elaborate case horoscopes or case nativities, mostly from the Hellenistic era, and by Hellenistic I mean like starting from the 2nd century BCE to the rise of Arabic astronomy. So let's say like the 8th century CE. So from this era, we don't have plenty of case horoscopes that we could make some sort of final judgment on them. But it is very clear that if we look at these case examples, we will see that theory and practice don't always overlap, which means that theoretical texts have a different approach, maybe have a broader tool set that is actually used in the actual horoscopes. And we can also see a sort of a tendency in some cases. Here I mean a text that I have just translated, that this is a horoscope of the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII, where the astrologers try to use different techniques, different lineages, different traditions together, and try to find the meeting points to give their readings. In these cases, the difficulty consisted of mostly consisted of the fact that these are inceptions, and maybe we can count. So we have 10 in case inceptions from this astrologer, and maybe we can discover 2-3 more case inceptions from other unknown astrologers from this era. And well, in the literature, in the Hellenistic literature, inceptions were. So it seems that the inceptions were not as popular as nativities. So the astrology of births, and that's why sometimes it can be a bit difficult to find what sort of theoretical texts the author could rely on. But there is another fact that there is a very notable and famous and influential astrologer of the Hellenistic era from perhaps from the 1st century CE, and this is the Dorotheus. And it's very easy to discover his techniques in the treatment of the inceptions. But there is one more thing that I would like to highlight, and sorry for the very lengthy reply. There is one more thing that is really interesting, because while both researchers and just those who just take interest focus on texts, on theoretical texts and teachings and tools and everything that is embedded in these texts, sometimes the very obvious question that what is astrology for is not asked. And even if this is asked, there are some obscure or vague answers, like oh yes, they would like to know the possible length of life for the native, the lifespan, or the diseases, or different areas of his life or her life, and so on, and some prognostical issues. But if we study these case inceptions, which are actual problems like political issues, or a theft, or voyages, for example, so ships not arriving in time, and the very ship owners where the cargo can be. Yes. So these are real world problems, not like the distant future and how we will, so the circumstances of our death. So in these cases, the very interesting feature is that the factors that are actually foretold, and so the unknown factors are maybe not as important as the confirmation of the factors that are already known. So there are a lot of there is a lot of room devoted to some features and some circumstances that are known. For example, if there is a gift given to notability, that what sort of a gift it is, but we know that it is lion cub, but the astrologer just thinks it is very important, to reaffirm that yes, this is a lion cub.
To show the thing working in it, its details.
And I think that it is not just that. It is also that astrology, and in this case, I'm just focusing on the inceptions. Astrology is at least as much about about explanation, so explaining why things are so in this or that fashion, as showing what to expect.
Yeah, yeah. That's quite interesting. And have you noticed? And I'm asking this. This is more personal question from things that I've seen in many horoscopes. Have you found incongruences in the horoscopes? Because it is not uncommon to sometimes you see the horoscope and everything is going to place, and then there are miscalculations and there are things that they missed completely. Sure. And you say, but how did I miss that? That's so obvious. Do you find this in this kind of horoscopes? Okay.
Absolutely. Well, I would like to tell about two examples. One example is that I don't remember exactly, but the astrologer, obviously. So the astrologer who used the Ptolemy's tables, handy tables, or the Amagest for calculations, miscalculated the position of the moon by 3 degrees. And this miscalculation led to the miscalculation of the lot of fortune also, which fell into the to the 8th house instead of the 7th house, or vice versa. I don't remember exactly. But he just thought confidently that one factor is due to the fact that the lot of fortune is found in one place. But of course, it was not in that place. So it was an obvious miscalculation from his part. In other cases, there are of course wrong numbers, but these are due to corruption of the manuscript tradition. So these can be fixed. And the other example I just wanted to tell is that, and I guess that this is really, so I appreciate this. This is about a letter received. We don't know the sender or the receiver, but my idea is that the receiver is the Emperor Zeno himself, and then that this letter can be related to the let's say siege of Constantinople by Theodoric, the king of Ostrogoths. Not yet Theodoric the Great, but just Theodoric the client king. And in this inception, the astrologer just confesses that when I first looked at the configuration, I thought that the letter was about some favorable news, and then I discovered, maybe opened the letter only, that these were adverse news, and he just tells that what were the factors that misled him.
Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Yes,
a sort of a revision of his own judgment. That's quite interesting. Yeah, and I think this is quite interesting and valuable to understand these practices, because you're seeing astrology applied. It's like you were saying, it's not just the big theoretical texts, which are of course extremely important, but it's the other facet of the coin, which is what they were doing with all that information. And these errors, I had to ask you this, because we find them, I think, in every tradition where you find charts, and sometimes you get these errors. Moon position, which was supposed to be easy to calculate, and we're always told by people who study the history of astronomy and mathematics, well, the moon is usually a position very easy to get right, and sometimes you get strange miscalculations. This guy's 3 hours, but 3 degrees, but I've seen whole days in which someone missed something. Okay, that's quite good.
Yes, but in this case, not just the inevitable error can be discovered, but also the I'd say professional honesty of the astrologer, who just didn't want to sweep this little error under the rug, but he just wanted to say proudly that, look, I just made this mistake, but of course I'm genius, but I just did this mistake, and if you look at this and that configuration, that the sun is intercepted by some malefics, and this which is described by Dorotheus, and the other one is described by Antigonus of Nicaea or something. So it is really nice. I appreciate that.
It is quite interesting. So we know the outcome and also the rectification to that outcome, which is, it's not just the good things that I got right. It's also the mistakes that were made, and how could we go again and see with the same techniques, see it in a different view. Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, there is one more thing I just wanted to mention in connection with this, sure. and this is that so we often take granted that a certain text was written by this or that a noun person, even if we are talking about fragments, for example. If people spend enough time reading the secondary literature, they will have a well-formed opinions about that this or that text was actually written by this or that figure. Now, I think that the situation is a little bit more complicated, and there are serious misunderstandings and serious misattributions that can lead astray even the researchers. I just want to give an example. There is a text attributed to Porphyry, the so-called introduction to Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos. This is a strange text, actually, because most of it looks like a paraphrase or a summary of a lost work, original written by Antiochus of Athens, and there are other parts which were discovered to have been translated from Arabic astrologers, and still, the prevalent view says that this at least the core of this text was written by Porphyry. But what I discovered, or what I did some research on, was that actually there are some fragments, very few fragments, in fact, that are from the introduction of Porphyry to Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, but these fragments can't be found in this text. And then this text actually doesn't give an introduction to Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, because the concepts it describes are not used by Ptolemy, or not that meaning. So there are some discrepancies that make it very likely that even if a part of this text can be attributed to Porphyry, which is not sure at all, actually, because it also turns out that just one branch of manuscripts attributed to Porphyry, and these branch of manuscripts just can be discovered from the 14th century on. Then this is just a very tiny part of this text, and that's why we shouldn't be bold to find some parallel thoughts between this and the other works of Porphyry, the philosophical ones.
Yeah, I think people are very quickly to drop the attributed to, which sometimes it's crucial, because if it's attributed to, it's because we're not sure exactly who the author is. We think it might be that one, but we're really not sure.
Even if we could be sure, the fact is that even the most venerated texts, like these tetrabiblos I've just mentioned, in the form as they are available at the moment, are not the ones that were written by the author, by the respective author. So it's not like nowadays that there is an authorized edition and your book is printed as you had just wished to be printed. But of course, in the transmission of texts, there were many alterations, and even these texts, like Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, were altered during the course of the centuries. And if you know that Ptolemy is an authority, so he's the divine Ptolemy. So his text should be as sacrosanct as Virgil's Aeneid, or I don't know, the Holy Bible. So nobody is supposed to touch it or to doctor it. But even though this is the case, this was changed. This was modified in this way or the other, and these modifications must have been much bigger in the cases of less venerated authors.
Yeah, I would imagine so. In my own research, and I'm on the almost on the other side of the spectrum, which is the early modern period, so 16th, 17th century.
Yes.
So completely on.
That's at the end of the story.
Exactly, yes. by the end of the story, and we still have, for example, with Tetrabiblos, which is a core text always in these matters, they're not working with the Tetrabiblos that we have today, or at least of the versions we have available today. So we have to keep. So they sometimes quote things, and I say, this is not the Ptolemy we have it. So we have to go to the Latin edition that they're using, and that's usually the commentary. There's usually a commentary on the Tetrabiblos and not the Tetrabiblos itself. So sometimes they're quoting from the commentator and not the authority itself, and that can create a lot of confusion, because when they say, "Oh, Ptolemy said this," and we said, "No, he didn't." So
but and also there is a fact that doesn't really help, which is that Ptolemy has a very peculiar style. So his Greek is it is not really easily understood. And so it is not a coincidence that still in the Hellenistic times there was a paraphrase of his magnum opus, and when especially when it comes to crucial passages, which is okay now this is something important. This is a point where we're just completely confused. Okay, but I don't understand the word. So you need to use all your philological equipment and expertise to make a sense of the text. And of course, translations, commentaries are just layers that build a bit a whole building on this. There is a case, for example, you also note very well that in the medieval times, the place that is associated with the mother is the 10th place, or the 10th house, to use the medieval expression. Now this is just a misunderstanding of an instruction by Ptolemy given in the chapter on the siblings. Not on the parents, but on the siblings. So there is some arcane calculation how to find the place of the siblings, and there is an instruction that can be misunderstood, and of course it was misunderstood, and it was taken granted later.
Yes. And you do have that a lot. You can see the misunderstandings. And Ptolemy it's like you're saying, Ptolemy is not an easy text. Even if you're accessing to a more pristine version of Ptolemy, if such a thing exists, but it's still a way of expressing things and putting things into explanation that sometimes you don't see where it's getting at.
Yes,
And
and obviously not the handbook. It is not a practical
no,
handbook.
it's not. It's not. I think he's more concerned in explaining why things function the way they do than how that is applied in practice to a given case.
Sure, it is a sort of a natural philosophy. It is part of his encyclopedia of natural philosophy, and should be treated as this.
Yes, and that also explains why, although he's an authority, then you see the lineages that follow him using, in practice, they are using other traditions or other authors such as Dorotheus, which then appears constantly as an alternative methodology to Ptolemy. And I think very early on that is recognized even by those who venerate Ptolemy as one of the central sources of astrology. And then Ptolemy said this, but in practice we do something different.
Yes, this is part of the story, and also if someone is a purist, with a strong sense of natural philosophy, and wants to have a building built up from the basics and a priori thinking, that they would discover that especially in the later part of the Tetrabiblos, Ptolemy seems to give up his master plan so he finally sometimes he gives in for the places that can have some indications on children, for example. So he can't build up the whole system and refine his own system as a crystal clear polygon.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because you're going to see this constantly, and especially in times, and I'm again going on to my own epoch, you see them trying to reform astrology in a sense of getting it more crystal clear in that same sense. And they have the same problems exactly as Ptolemy did. It works to a point in the theoretical field, but then when you're going to put that into practice, and then they get stuck in things as houses and other dignities, and they cannot explain that as they would like to explain it, and things start to get jumbled. And that also explains, I would think, the variety and the variety of opinions that you can witness at the end of the tradition of astrology. So by the 17th century, I think everyone who has ever wrote a book on astrology has given their opinion, and it gets messy in a lot of areas, a lot of core areas of the art, and it gets confusing. And I think it's more or less a reflection of what Ptolemy also is doing with that questioning of the terms and the origin of the terms and implicities, which contaminates, if we can use such harsh word, the whole thinking and the whole the way they consider certain aspects of astrology, certain technical aspects.
Yes, but I guess that there are other factors which are not always taken into consideration. So I guess that a lot of ink has been spilled on Ptolemy's terms and Ptolemy's lot of fortune and Ptolemy's house system, which is a will-o-wisp, I guess, that we can chase for forever, and these obvious things. But we sometimes forget that the concept of the medieval almutans, the victors, or the dignities, in the way that so it's like. So there are some planets associated by certain parts of the zodiac, and there are different levels and different ranks of this sort of influence or interconnectedness. So this is also Ptolemaic, because if we don't, because it was Ptolemy who came up with the idea that there is a sort of natural correspondence between the parts of the zodiac and between the planets, and he described 5 different types of this, the domiciles or the houses, the exaltations, the trigons or the triplicities, the terms, and this configuration, which is not the decans as they were used later in the medieval times. And these are different types of associations, of familiarities, and each of them can be a link, and the more link you have, so like more strings you have to move the puppet, the better influence you will have on this. But mountains, so these victors can be only defined in this mindset. So if we don't take this natural explanatory device of autonomy, that these just lose sense.
Yes, and I think sometimes there's a difference, and you can see that, for example, in Arabic texts, which I'm a bit more familiar with later, in which there is a clear distinction between a planet having a certain degree of power, dignity, whatever you want to call it, by accumulating a certain number of these positions, or the interpretation of these positions by themselves, the function that each of these divisions and segments and partitions of the signs have by its own, the meaning that they have. And I think that's something that sometimes it's not clear as we progress in the texts, and they give, at least by the end of the story, they are giving too much importance on the weight and the power that the accumulation of these conditions gives the planet, and they're at least not clearly. They don't give it a proper interpretation. So because it is in this specific division, it has this kind of output, and that sometimes gets a bit lost, at least in the theoretical texts, in most theoretical texts, because they're more concerned with this assessment of power of the planet than probably the interpretation which is associated with that position.
Yeah. So quantity overtakes quality. So we're talking about quantitative thinking when things are weighed and measured, and the mathematical expressions just take over, and the details, like the qualitative differences are just neglected or even forgotten. Yes.
To a point where you get to the extreme of certain authors by the 17th century simply discarding a great portion of these divisions because they don't think of them as rational.
Yes. This is a part of the story, or it seems to them that these divisions had been devised by the Arabs, by the Saracens, and
exactly.
So that's why they should be discarded right now.
Unholy,
yes.
Unholy creations and foolishness, as they say, of the Arabs. So they discard a lot of the astrological system, and that gives them a lot of problems later on. But it's interesting that you can follow these routes of discussions to Ptolemy and to certain inconsistencies in the tradition that create these problems that linger on, and that perhaps we don't find so much in the practice. But when they start to interfere with the practice, I think that becomes clear that they're starting to get problems. I was thinking, and Elena would speak about this much better than I, because she studied 15th century manuscript, where clearly the author, which is a practitioner, so it's again case studies. It's not a theoretical book. It's a book with applied examples, and you can see that in certain examples he doesn't know exactly which system to use. So he sometimes uses the so-called Egyptian terms division, and sometimes he uses the Ptolemaic, because it's in the phase where they don't know exactly which ones are better because it's being questioned. And also, for example, with the faces, the decans, and there is this. He already mentions the Arabic Hindu decans, so against the faces system. So there is also attentive to integrate the two things there, and that will give practical results which are different, and you see the problem there when they start to, when the theoretical doubts hit the practice and create an impossibility or difficulty in judgment. And that's also a very interesting point to see in the practice. How do I use this? Shall I use A or B?
But I guess that this is nothing new. This is nothing new. Among the texts I mentioned in connection with the imperial astrologer of Zeno, there is a theoretical text, and this is just a part of a chapter, which is a case nativity for an individual who was born in 428, and I have an idea who the native might be. So actually, at the end of this chapter, which is about how to calculate the houses, and this is the so-called arcabaceous houses or places. But in this form, this chapter is from the 9th century, so we can't be sure that it was originally in the compendium in this form. And at the end of this chapter, there are some instructions like if you want to do the calculations according to Ptolemy, then use Ptolemy's tools and Ptolemy's tables and Ptolemy's techniques and Ptolemy's philosophy. If you want to do to follow the instructions of Valence, then use Valence's numbers and Valence's ascension times and Valence's lot of fortune, and then do the same with the Egyptians and the other folks. So basically, the message is that. And I guess that was the approach adopted by the astrologer. That we have different handbooks, different major authors, like canonic authors, like Ptolemy, like Valens, like Dorotheus, like the Egyptians, these obscure folks, and let's apply their rules. Down to the minute. So if they have different tables for positions, like ephemerides, for example, we should use different ephemerides, as if the reality could be different. Yes, and if we analyze the same nativity or inception, it's like color filters, with different points, and we just connect these points, and we will have a 3D description of the case.
It's quite interesting that finding so early that the same problem. Yes, probably it's a problem that's always there. Which tradition to follow, which technique to use. And I would say they would follow the one that they were taught with, or the line of their teacher or their school. I'm not sure how that would work at that time.
Or after transmissions between cultures, and it is like accidental what sort of texts were translated from one language to the other, because we know that Dorotheus might have been an influential astrologer, but his poem is lost, and also a prosaic form of his work is lost as well. So if we just look at the Hellenistic period, we can see that Dorotheus is cited and quoted in a lot of cases. Sometimes we can also read some snippets of his poem, but he's one of the astrologers. But later on in the Arabic era, Dorotheus is one of the superstars. So we can say that the Dorotheus is the galactic center of the Arabic astrology. It's like everything is just revolving around Dorotheus, much less. So Ptolemy and Valens is much less emphasized, at least in the early period. And why Dorotheus? Maybe because one of the books that this single person who went to Persia, and he had a library, he had a book by Dorotheus, and not someone else, not like Chapso, for example.
So yeah, so got someone is accidentally put into highlight instead of others. Yes, yes, that's always a question that I have in my mind, which is when we see this in the timeline, in a huge timeline, in larger timeline, you can see clearly there are certain methodologies and techniques that you find in specific periods that simply don't have a continuation, although they will quote that author eventually. Valens has a lot of techniques that do not seem to have been transmitted along. So my question is always, is this happening because of these reasons? Because for some reason those books were not highlighted, sufficiently translated, sufficiently transmitted? Was there a judgment in these techniques are more pliable than others? I think sometimes also in terms of calculation, I think the simpler calculations, although this is not completely true, but usually things which are more straightforward tend to survive a little bit more than things which are too convoluted and too complex to calculate. Because I think the human being is a bit lazy in terms of
that might be true, but when it comes to theoretical texts, I guess just the opposite is true, because if we want to find an author whose style is really hard to comprehend, and his instructions are difficult to follow. Now, this is Ptolemy, and I guess that part of the veneration of Ptolemy was that he was the great astronomer, and the other thing was that when people just opened the Tetrabiblos and started reading it, and there with that sort of a holy awe, that what is it? I think that is a very subtle and sublime thing, but I don't understand the word.
Let me ask you a question that I've been asking for quite some time, and I don't know if you can answer it to me, but do you think in terms of a language, is Ptolemy as complicated, in other words, such as the Almagest, as he is in the Tetrabiblos? That is something that always puzzles me. Perhaps you don't have this answer because I'm not familiar with the text of the Almagest, but I was always wondered if the style is as complicated in one text or the other, because as you were saying, part of his fame comes from the Almagest and the geography, and so which are cornerstones of ancient and medieval science. And I was wondering if the language is the same as in the Tetrabiblos, or
Definitely.
It is, okay.
Definitely, yes.
So
definitely.
It is the same man writing. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the difference is that so this is just an obvious fact that astronomy has always been a more popular topic, subject of academic interest than astrology.
Yeah.
So okay, so there is a sort of unbroken lineage from the time of Ptolemy to the present day, that astronomers and researchers, historians of science have studied Ptolemy. So that's why there is an unbroken tradition how to interpret Ptolemy's astronomy, and also astronomy is something that can be proved. So if there is a description and there is some doubt to how this particular passage should be interpreted, then the models or actual observations can help to clarify. In the cases of astrology, even if you find something really weird, maybe you will have an idea that, okay, maybe this author just knew something that nobody else knew. So in this case, even an emendation can just kill this little golden nugget that you have just discovered.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer, because that's what I'm thinking. Is he as complicated, or does he use the same style in other books?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Great. That's wonderful to know. Now that you mentioned another topic, which I wanted to ask you, perhaps so we can wrap up a bit. We've been talking quite some time. How do you find, in your experience, the acceptance of the study of astrological texts. Because we have been asking along the podcast how people have been feeling, and you as still a student, so in your progress toward the PhD, how have you found in your specific field the acceptance of working astrology texts? Has it been easy? Did you?
Well, what the response of the fellow researcher is, if this is the question, actually, I started my studies in a doctoral school that was called Philosophy and History of Science. Now, in this doctoral school, everything was accepted completely.
Okay.
So that wasn't very weird or very strange area of interest. Not to speak about the fact that my thesis supervisor is an accomplished researcher of medieval magic. So if this is a legitimate topic to do research in the topic of learned magic, then astrology can't be a problem. And what I think is that a lot. So it has never been questioned that history of philosophy is a legitimate field of interest and scientific research. So people have been reading the handbooks or the fragments of pre-Socratic philosophers, or the books of Plato or Aristotle, although we all know that in terms of natural science, these are seriously outdated. And in the case of pre-Socratics, we can't say that there is anything else but natural science embedded in these fragments. So, but it is somehow socially accepted. So studying philosophy and studying old schools of philosophy is legitimate, and it is legitimate to publish articles, to publish translations, to publish new collections of study texts. In the case of astrology, there is always a sort of interference with astrology as pseudoscience, even practiced now, and I think this is just let's say zeitgeist. It's just fashion. So it has nothing to do any sort of objective evaluations. If philosophy is a legitimate topic to study, the history of astrology, as well as the history of alchemy, magic, religions, to give an example, or anything else, any other products of human culture and learning, legitimate topics of research. Of course, even within this field, there are more interesting areas and less interesting areas. For example, dealing with texts and finding the interconnections and proving that a certain case horoscope was cast by author A and not by author B. It is not so it is like groundwork. It's like it's like what the programmers do at the software developing company. So it's not a marketing part of the story. Yes, but I guess that this is partly so. In my case, it is also something that makes my life a little bit easier, because what I can say that I don't need to care about the techniques of astrology, whether they work, whether they are legitimate, whether they are crazy or not. But I can say that I deal with texts and authors, and if I don't want to, I don't need to take care what they are actually writing about.
Yeah. Yes,
This is a defense strategy from my side, but otherwise, I don't think that in the academic circles, in my doctoral school, it is an issue.
Yes, yes. I'm asking this because it is varied, of course, throughout the areas. There are areas which are quite okay with studying subjects such as astrology. There are other places where astrology sometimes is a bit difficult to sell, and you have to really explain what you're doing, because sometimes there's still today, although the history of astrology has been established for quite some decades, there's still a resistance or a misunderstanding, sometimes more than a resistance, to what exactly are we studying.
And the problem is that even there is tacit acceptance in the scientific community that this is a legitimate area. We still don't have, for example, a reliable and up-to-date monography written on, for instance, Hellenistic astrology. So just to mention a recent thing, there is a publication that was published in February, I guess, Hellenistic astronomy in its context, was published by the academic publishing house Brill.
Yes, I know which one.
And it had, so there is a glossary, and in the glossary a lot of astrological concepts had to be clarified again, and if you look at other publications, these must be clarified again.
Yeah.
So when I write an article and there is something inevitable, so I need to refer to the zodiacal signs, for example, or the places, the so-called houses, or the triplicities. I always have to insert a footnote that this is this and that and that and that, and sometimes it is really tedious.
It is.
It is really tedious. Nobody will see the greater picture. And sometimes there are some oversimplifications that a reviewer can find and say, oh, right, but this is not exactly true.
Exactly. I know exactly what you mean, and I have the same experience. Every time you need to discuss some technicality, which sometimes it's crucial, either for the transmission of a text or for a follow-up of an idea or a philosophy that's behind them. And you have to clarify, okay, so before I start to explain that he uses A instead of B, I have to explain the whole system again. Sure. And you do that, it's like you're saying, you do that in one simple paper, you do that in your thesis, and there's glossaries for this and for that, and there's still not a unified corpus of books, of works that you can this is explained on this book or on that topic, and it's complicated. It gets complicated.
Or just terminology. And of course, I'm not talking about arcane concepts only used by one or two authors, but something really widespread or really familiar to every sort of astrologer. Yes, and also some anachronisms. For example, dignity. So we in astrological contexts, we often talk about dignities, and this is wholly legitimate if we are in the context of Arabic and later astrology. But I barely believe that it is legitimate when we use this expression in the context of Hellenistic astrology. Even if we do find something that looks like dignity, I guess that the what this term evokes is not exactly the core idea that the Hellenistic authors might have conceived.
Exactly. So the context is also, we need to understand these in terms of concept and also context in terms of
Sure.
time, culture, where this context is being applied. And I completely agree with you. I think that's one of the crucial works to be done in this field in the next decades, I hope. And I hope the Astro Project can also help to at least create some sort of connection between the several researchers, so we can solve this, even if partially.
Yeah. Even for so it is an important thing to do for the later epoch, as you mentioned, but also there's a lot of things to do for Hellenistic times and for the early Arabic era.
Yeah, and it requires really experts in each time period and each cultural context to do this, because there's not one person that can make this kind of monumental work. It has to be a group of several people, each specialized in authors, contexts, times.
Not to speak about the fact that there are many uncharted territories. Just to mention some obvious cases very shortly. Later Arabic astrology. We don't even know the names of the authors of the works. So it looks like Arabic astrology just stopped functioning in the 11th century, which is not the case.
Exactly.
It is not the case. It is not
They
the case.
translated it and then it stopped.
Okay. Well, they sold it the rights for translations, and that's it. So then they just laid back and thank you very much. Okay, now. Now it's over. No, of course. So Ottoman Turkish astrologers, Persian astrologers up to our days. Also, the vast amount of material still latent in Greek manuscripts, which my project aims at bringing out and bringing to sunlight and translating into English. So many anonymous things that are neglected because of the fact that they are just anonymous, and of course these seem to have less importance than works or fragments of well-known or better-known authors.
Yes.
So it's like we would like to give a description of a planet that we just don't know, or we just know it from one side.
Exactly, that there's a whole universe of material that's still to be, even within the European astrology. Even if we, it's the problem of the international picture and seeing the global picture of the astrological practice, but also within the European astrology. And I found that because I'm studying case examples which are centered here in Portugal, which doesn't have an established historiography at this topic, you can still see how we have to always be quoting Anglo-Saxon, French, Italian case studies to compare with, for example, Iberian case studies, which are completely different, have a completely different nature. And I would imagine other countries with other languages, which are not so easy to read, must have their own traditions, their own gems in terms of historical research, which are known and haven't come out to the light. So yeah, I think there's this globalization process, and then to understand the wide range of the presence of astrology in many cultures and contexts is that needs to be addressed, because our history, and this is a sin that we're all a bit guilty of, because we are too much Eurocentric in many aspects of the historiography. And nowadays things start to widen up with a lot of works, but still, as you said, there's a lot of things to be done. Things don't end in certain periods. They continue to have their own lineages, their own history, and we need to address that.
Yes, but while yes, it is true, but I guess that when it comes to Cultures like Persian culture, and works that are available in manuscripts and local libraries. So I don't think that foreigners can really do much with these texts if the source material is just unavailable. So even now, if you study Portuguese case examples because you know the language and these are available for you. Others can study other things because these are available for them. So nowadays, the possibility to translate, for example, Greek astrological texts from manuscripts to other languages, or just study these unpublished texts, is made possible by the fact that European libraries, at least a couple of libraries, were founded or just decided to upload the scans of manuscripts on the respective web pages. There are some libraries which did it. There are some libraries which are doing it. There are some libraries who don't seem to take interest,
and some which don't have the funds to engage in that kind of.
Yes, but it's okay. But when it comes to this excuse that they don't have the funds, well, actually, libraries were burnt in the past by accident and are burnt even nowadays. So I don't think that in the age of digitalization, it can be afforded that unique primary materials, texts remain latent and unknown and unstudied in the vaults of libraries. This is I think it is against our culture.
Yes, no, I agree. And taking also that, so I would also like to speak about your recent launched project.
Yes, thank you.
The HOROI, which exactly deals with handling this kind of situation, which is to translate, to make available in English, because it's the international language of culture nowadays, a lot of material that hasn't been translated. That's what I want to ask. Are you I know that you're translating originals, so material that hasn't been translated, and you're also working on translations. New translations of
no. Well, I think so I would like to think that what I am doing is the right thing to do and the real thing to do. So not to make retranslations of already translated texts, even if these translations are imperfect from different viewpoints, mostly because of the source texts. So because previous translations were always mostly were made from existing critical editions, and also the philosophy how to make critical editions changed in the last couple of decades. And also, in many cases, new manuscript witnesses were found, and these weren't included in the critical editions. So what I am doing is without any master plan, as I just feel it can be done. I am translating Greek texts from the original to English, and these are always, or mostly, so 99% texts that haven't been translated so far. Because this is the timely thing to do, I guess. And I would like to translate as many texts as possible. I estimate that there can be thousands of pages of texts latent in Byzantine manuscripts. Many texts, the majority of texts, anonymous. So these are either notes of practicing astrologers about some theoretical issues, or remnants of astrological works. So many sort of things can be found there. Um, and also I put an emphasis on case horoscopes that haven't been studied or haven't been translated so far. And the design of the project enables me to have a complete control on the text, and on the translations, which means that I don't need to wait until I can collect all the manuscripts of a certain text. So and start the time-consuming work of building up a critical edition, and then the work on translation. So when I find that one passage could be translated better, or there is another manuscript witness that has a better reading, then I can change this particular point. So this is what my project is about, which was launched on 29th of May. So it is really
Is a
fresh.
newborn.
Yes, that was the foundation inception for it. But actually, I must admit that it was not consciously designed by me, but it was designed by the universe. Let's say.
Yeah. No, great. The project name is HOROI, the HOROI Project, and
Yes.
I'll place a link in the description of the podcast, so
thank you very much.
Can know and can access what you're doing and can contribute to your work.
Yes, because it is a community-funded project.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I don't have any grants or scholarships at the background. Just it is completely funded by the community. So. Thank you very much for inserting the link to this project, because if someone thinks that this is an important and noble project to support, that they can do it.
They can contribute. Yeah,
they can contribute, exactly.
I think what you're doing is quite precious. As I said, it's making available certain texts and also these practical texts and these practical examples that usually don't have the attention of scholars so much.
Yes.
So far,
I have just started translating text originally written in Arabic, and this is a sort of a memoir written by a pupil of a very famous Persian astrologer, that is Abu Makhshar, and this was written by his pupil Shadan, who does the master's stories, anecdotes, professional responses to different astrological issues that the pupil asked, and also some example charts, nativities, and inceptions are found in this collection. I think it is really interesting because it depicts a vivid image of a practicing astrologer, and also helps to see the connection between the realm of theoretical texts and the practice. Because so far we have been talking about these. Let's say these are two different classes of texts, like theoretical texts and practical examples, and somewhere between these two ones there are the case examples embedded in the original theoretical compendia, like valences, example charts illustrating a certain teaching, of course. But we can also see that so by reading this text, we can also see that what sort of problems astrologers had to face with. And
also the teaching process, I think, in that particular case. So how is the transmission of the information done orally, at least with the presence of the teacher, which is most of the time information that we don't have available for a lot of periods.
Yes.
And I think that is particularly interesting because some of my research also addresses teaching material. So it's not books in itself; it's manuals for students. So it's interesting to see how that transmission is made from a practitioner to a learning practitioner, future practitioner, and
yes,
I think that I look forward to to read that, because I think that's quite an interesting text.
yes.
I've heard about it a lot, but I never had access to it.
Yeah. But it has the Arabic version is available, but it hasn't been edited, so it's still in the libraries. There is the Greek version that I'm translating at the moment, and there is also a Latin, a partial Latin translation that has been edited in a critical edition. So it is actually available, but even if if there is someone who reads the Latin, then they can enjoy these anecdotes and stories and instructions and teachings. But I guess that more audience can be reached if they are translated into English.
Yes,
so and it is also possible that there will be someone who in the future will take up the task of translating the Arabic original, which would be of course the better way. Although we mustn't forget that Arabic works are often extant in late manuscripts. So sometimes if we have a Greek version, we can have a sort of a double check because these Greek versions were translated in the 10th, 11th centuries, and they can display an earlier stage of the text, which can be used to see this. This course of alterations a little bit better.
Yeah. The whole history of the text itself.
That's right.
And how it goes on. Yes. Well, I think we've talked already a lot of things. I think there will be many more topics to.
Well, I'm pretty sure about this. That we could continue this conversation for a long time.
Yes, and perhaps we can return to it with a specific topic if you would like in the future. I would love to.
I would love to. Yeah. Yes.
By now, I thank you very much for being available to participate in the podcast.
I thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
And we hope to see you again soon.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. I would love to come back. Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Luis, for inviting me again. And just anytime you just feel that I could be on your show, let's say, then just please let me know about that.
Yes, well, let's make arrangements for it.
All right.